everybody. Okay. Thank you, and thank you for having me. I will tell you some things about Geuze this evening, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's not too boring because it's always, yeah, a little technical side, but it's also a lot of fun. So, Geuze, I'll start with some. I'll start with some history to understand the origins of the beer. Not too much, but just some words. Um, for the first thing, it's important to understand that if we talk Geuze, that the brew itself is called Lambic. So we are called Lambic brewers, and Geuze is in fact bottle conditioned Lambic. So it's important not to confuse Lambic and Geuze. Also, all labels often speak about Geuze Lambic. You will see. Now, what is Lambic? It probably started as an improved version of primitive Belgian wheat beer that was brewed with wind malt and without hops. So, as from the 14th century, hops were introduced to keep the beer because it's important to have a beer that keeps well, and brewers boiled it for a long time for stability. To make lambic, you need malted spring barley, malted winter barley, about 50-50, and malted wheat for at least 40%. And then some sources also mention oats. By the way, we made a special version of Geuze with 10% of oats. Very nice. And what we need more is aged hops, which are hops that are more than 1 year old. Of course, brewing water, and the wild yeast of the brewery area. And of course, for this beer, a lot of patience.
Yeah, we got it. Great.
Okay. You good?
Yeah. Still okay?
Yep.
Okay. Well, you see some text, the text what I was talking about, and maybe I just switched to the raw materials of lambic. I was explaining about malted spring barley, malted winter barley, the unmalted wheat for at least 40%. Some sources mentioned also oats, and we made one with 10% of oats. Very nice. Use aged hops, brewing water, wild yeasts of the brewery area, and a lot of patience. We work according the turbid mash system. So finally, a milk-colored wort is boiled separately and then added back to the mash tun. The fermentation is called spontaneous because we work with the wild yeast that we collect from the cool ship, and we don't brew in summertime because then cool ship is overgrown by unwanted bacteria. That's why we were. I hope you can see the picture of an old brew house, 16th century brew house. Now, on the left side, you see two coppers where wort can be boiled. In the middle, a man is standing close to a mash tun. And on the right, there is a guile. And on the right of the guile, two cool ships. Two cool ships because in most breweries, from one brood, they made beer at two different gravities, a weak one and a strong one. And in our case, the strong one is called lambic, and that lambic is used to produce Geuze. How did it start for Geuze? In the 18th century, some lambic was bottled and also bottled in stone jars. Sometimes it fermented and sometimes not. And so customers were not always happy with fermenting lambic because these weak bottles often broke, and certainly also the stone jars, but it fermented from time to time, and people liked it very much. Then comes the 19th century, where the Lambic is sweetened. That is mostly, or it started probably during the Dutch time. Our country was part of Holland as from 1815 until 1830. And well, the Dutch liked this lambic, but with some sugar added. And so this lambic, when it was bottled, it foamed a lot. And it is in 1828, so during the Dutch time, that the word Geuze beer appears for the first time. I won't go into detail of how and when and why, but it's an interesting fact. You also see a little publicity of Mr. Jacques Van Der, Lambic Mousseux. So it doesn't call it Geuze yet, but Lambic Mousseux. And for a long time in the 19th century, both names will be used in parallel. And you see that the beer foams because Mr. Jacques Van Der, he writes on his card, lié avec du fil de fer. So the bottle or the cork is fixed with an iron wire. You don't have to fix it if it does not foam. And then, of course, you need sometimes a special equipment to serve your bottle because beer is not always clarified, and then there is a lot of sediment. But with this special device, you can serve it very clearly. And you see, to take out the cork, you also have a little special device. That Lambic and Geuze were very important for Belgium is proved by this extract from a book, German book, written by Karel in Nuremberg in 1831. And he says that Lambic geht jetzt häufig nach Amerika, so there is a lot of export of Lambic to America, and of course this was bottled Lambic. Today we would say it is Geuze, and it was. I have to tell you some things also about blending, because Geuze, of course, I taught you about brewing Lambic, and we have to bottle it, but it is more complicated than that. So Geuze needs a very nice foam, and it is not so easy to get it organized. So there was indeed a great or a big problem of consistency. Sometimes bottles exploded, sometimes bottles stayed flat, and so brewers worked a lot on quality. So it means that the art of blending became very important. And I found a brewer's newspaper magazine from 1860 that describes how a good blend was made. Of course, the gravity has to be exact, and the blend has to consist of about 60% lambic of 1 year and 40% lambic of more than 2 years old, sometimes 3 years old, and all the beers aged in wooden casks. But as he says, tasting, and it's still like that today, tasting is the most important aspect of Geuze blending. So a practiced beer preparer notices the slightest traces of acetic acid formation. That is a very important one. If your lambic turns to beer vinegar, it's finished. Some people think that you still can blend it. You can probably at 0.5 to 1.5%. So if you have a barrel room with 1,000 casks, you probably can have 10 casks with some acetic acid to be blended, not more. And in the early days, of course, they had the advantage that they made a lot of farro. And farro was a blend. It was a sweetened light version of lambic. So a lot of lambic with acetic acid risk was blended into farro. And so it was sweet and sour when they added sugar. But the mildest lambics, as it is still today, the mildest lambics are used for Geuze. And sometimes barrels with the pronounced lactic acid could also be blended, but it's really a small volume. When Geuze came to very nice quality, as from 1880, glass bottles were available on industrial scale because there were half mechanical ways to blow them. And then in the second half of the 19th century, Geuze became the most important specialty beer in Belgium. It was by far one of the strongest beers too. Here are some examples of labels. Some of you know that Geuze was for many years sold with a white dash on the bottle to mark the top of the bottle, and that there was no label on Geuze bottles. But in the beginning, in the end of the 19th century, volumes were so small and labor was cheap that labels were just fixed on the bottle by hand. They glue them with yeast. It's a very easy thing. You mix some yeast with water, and then it's a nice glue for labels. You see that both names are combined. Lambics, that is what we often see at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. Also here, the one of Brasserie de Notre Dame in Halle. It's Lambics from Petre Brewery. The old wooden mash tuns by that time have been replaced by cast iron mash tuns with fully mechanically driven, mostly by steam engines. And then, of course, Belgium suffered from the First World War, where brewers had to make their beer, to water it down to 0.8 volume of alcohol. And a lot of casks disappear. From the 800,000 wooden tons of lambic in Brussels, 700,000 disappeared during the war. They were used for a lot of things, but not for beer production. Another nice label here from Deleuze warehouses, retail. They used to have their own brand of Geuze. Between the two wars, there was again a growth of Geuze sales. And of course, Kriek, cherry lambic, grew. And then a new beer, a new kind of Geuze appeared. And that finally, it was created during the First World War because there was not enough old lambic. Brewers started to blend top fermenting beers and other beers to make cheap filtered Geuze. And it will become something very important in the brewing business in the lambic breweries. And then there is again the Second World War with problems, and again gravity problems. And then, of course, after the war, like in many countries, a consolidation of lambic breweries. There were a lot of brewers and blenders in 1945 still active. By 1970, it was reduced to 11 breweries and 12 blenders. And most breweries or blenderies merged into finally one brewery, which is called Geuze Bellevue. It was finally sold to AB InBev, and now a few months ago, AB InBev decided to stop producing filtered Geuze. So the very special thing that happened now is that traditional Geuze became again the most sold Geuze on the market, although it's not really big volumes. Some other things in these times, 1975, you probably all know that there is a Geuze museum in Brussels from Cantillon Brewery that was created in 75. And also our blendery and brewery, Boon, was created in 1975. So I think next week or in 2 weeks, it will be exactly 50 years ago that I started this kind of blendery and brewery. And what is also important to know is that after 1994, no more Lambic breweries closed their doors. What happened from 95 to 25 now? 4 new Lambic blenders, 3 new breweries, although they are small, but it's really interesting that they are there. And then we got a protection from the European Union in 1997, which helped us a lot because it created 2 types of Geuze. One Geuze filtered, and then the other one is called oude Geuze. So if you see the word oude Geuze, it means it's the traditional one. And then, of course, the quality of Geuze is now much better than 50, 60 years ago because our equipment, as you see, this is our brew house as the equipment, it's much better than what it was before. So today, no lead pipes, no cast iron mash tuns, no zinc anymore, or even no copper anymore in our brewery. It's all oak or stainless steel. This brew house can produce 125 hectoliters of lambic per brood, and we can brew continuously if we want. But we only have 10 brewing weeks in a year during the winter time, and we brew about 18 broods of lambic in a week. If you make a good bottle of Geuze, if you want to make a good bottle of mead, you need stock, and that is an expensive thing in a lambic brewery. So lambic stocks in oak casks, they grow everywhere, and it's about 25 times the volumes of 1990. So actually, there is no growth, I think, since 2018 or 19. But the stock in oak casks is about 45,000 hectoliters today. And on the other end, there are also 60,000 hectoliters kept in stainless steel by some lambic brewers that are specialized in fruit beers. Here's a picture of one of the largest casks of our brewery. We have 41 of these, and you see diameter in the middle is about 4 meters. Content of this cask is 260 hectoliter, or if you talk liters, 26,000 liters, which is a nice volume. That's how we store lambic in our barrel room number 1. The ones on the top are the oldest one. We have in our brewery about casks from 5 closed old lambic breweries. The oldest foeders, what we call them, the oldest foeder. The oldest one is from 1883. So it's more than 140 years old. And we keep them in good condition because we have our own cooper's workshop where we can steam and also center and repair all the casks we need. Some other views and some more, also smaller casks. We use smaller casks because they sometimes they fit in blendings, and because the size of a brood never meets with the size of a foeder, so we need this smaller casks to store all the beer at the right moment. This is barrel room number 5. So this contains the large foeders of 26,000 liters. We mainly use them for 1-year-old lambic. The aging goes slower, but in my opinion, the beer is milder and more elegant. Yes, so maybe some other facts on Geuze. That's the size, the number of breweries and blenderies active in Brussels and around Brussels in 1850. And at that moment, there are already analyses on wild yeast by Mr. or Professor Max Rees in Germany. So it's a famous beer because of spontaneous fermentation. All these scientists are very much interested in the beer. And also the Belgian Professor Van Laar, he describes a Torilla yeast in Lambic. And the name of this yeast is changed to Brettanomyces in 1904 when Clausen discovers the same type of yeast in English stock ale. Very interesting, the tasting notes of Professor Van Laar. He says young lambic contains considerable amounts of lactic acid. While lambic is aging, the level of lactic acid decreases while esters are formed. And this is really exact, and it's amazing that already in 1891 it was clear for them. And then about the taste, he writes, what confirms this vision is that lambics containing low levels of acid, and most important, few acetic acid, are the most esteemed because of the taste and the perfume. That's an important one. A good balance of acidity is quality for a good bottle of Geuze. Again, about the old days, why was it possible to make a very fantastic bottle of Geuze? Just because only 8% of the production was conditioned as Geuze. So all the rest was sold as lambic and faro and could be sweetened. You see, that's how they sold faro in big casks, and the beer was mostly sold flat and sweetened every day. So they prepared what just was needed to sell in the bar the day itself. And then, yes, I already talked to you about the 800,000 casks. So only 100,000 empty casks were left in 1918. And then Professor Kufraat identified 2 different Brettanomyces. The one is called Lambicus and the other one is Brusselensis. Today we know that only Brusselensis exists and that Lambicus, in fact, is a Brusselensis that is forming a pseudomycelium. But in fact, so a Brusselensis that is working under other conditions. That's how they look. After 5 days in malt extract, the other one is a slide culture. And there's a lot to say about these yeasts, but I think there is no time today to speak about that, and it's also quite technical. So let's go to pictures, and this is one of the pictures of our cellar where bottles are stacked on pallets. So these are all bottles on layers, and one pack of this is 600 bottles. So we in totally have at this moment nearly 2 million bottles of Geuze and old style Geuze and Greek in stock. Now, what are qualities and flaws of our Geuze? Because many of you probably taste Geuze, but it's not always easy to make a choice and to know what is fine, what is a quality, and what is a flaw. Sometimes people tell me they had a Geuze that tasted vinegar and they describe it as very, very strong. But it's not very strong. It's vinegar is just a flaw. And so the characteristics of a good bottle of Geuze, of course, the color, but not so much can go wrong. Normally, Geuze is made from, or Lambic is brewed with pale malt. Clarity, here locally in our village and also in Brussels, I suppose, Geuze is to be decanted straight into the glass. So our customers request the beer bright in a glass. It does not mean that they want us to filter it, but they want is to decant it in the glass and to leave the sediment in the bottle. Is it important? It can be, because the yeast, not only the yeast of Lambic, the yeast has a bitter taste, and you always can taste it separately in a small glass and see if there is any difference. About hop aroma and flavor, it is not to be perceived. It's very low. Hops enhance complexity of the taste, and they help the Geuze to have some fullness. But of course, we have one very good technical reason to use a lot of hops. That is because hop is bacteriostatic. So it helps the lambic to keep mild. If we do not, or if we use only small quantity of hops, our beer will go very sour. About the bitterness, so you will not taste alpha bitterness, only oxidized beta bitterness. So the beta acids are normally not soluble in a brut, but if they're oxidized, they go easily in solution and they give a very pleasant bitterness. And then there is the influence of wood, vanilla, spiciness, and some body from oak house can be present moderately. It is tricky to use new casks, but it can be a tool. But it's tricky because sometimes a lot of astringency comes into the beer, which can be a problem. And then, of course, spontaneous fermentation. What do these yeasts do with your brew? Fruity, estery, moderately sour, and acidic aromas arrive in the beer. The famous horsey, leathery, phenolic aromas from Brettanomyces may be present at very moderate levels, but they do not depend only from Brettanomyces yeast. They also depend on the way you brew lambic and on the quality of the raw material, so wheat and barley. And then there is some called goatee bitterness, like the bitterness of goat cheese, but also there these fatty acids should be esterified because they give a very nice grapefruit and citrusy-like aroma. And the taste can be dry because we have very high fermentation degrees, up to sometimes more than 100% apparent. Carbonation should be okay because a flat bottle is not a bottle of Geuze. It's just bottle lambic. Sometimes you can find these bottles on the market, and then they are labeled as luric, which means that it did not ferment it is lazy. But in fact, if other brewers have lazy beer, they will, if from a fermenting brewery, they will not put it on the market. But it's on the market, it exists. About the body, so no sweet taste, but a dry mouthfeel. and the apparent attenuation is between 85 and 100%. Its apparent attenuation, it means that even with this attenuation at 100%, the beer still contains some unfermentable sugar, because the sugar has a higher weight than water and alcohol lower weight, but at 100%, the gravity of Geuze is the same as water. And so no sweetness, malt, sugar, or other sweetness is present, but alcohol. If you taste a stronger Geuze, one of our mariage parfait, for example, it has 8%. You will taste some sweetness from the alcohol, and some esters and oak components can give a warming sweet suggestion. I'm nearly at the end, ladies and gentlemen. Old standards, if you find old texts about this beer and you see old gravities, well, before, in the beginning of the 19th century, the gravity was expressed in degrees Baume, and then it switched to Belgian degrees, which we stopped using as from 1994, where we switched to degrees Plato. So this is the old standard. What is there on the market today? Different gravities between 12.5 and 16.8 Plato. But you can just look at the alcohol content on the label. So you will always find or see the difference on the alcohol content, exactly. And then, so the apparent extract is, as I said, from 1000 to 1010, or 0 to 2.6 degrees Plato. And at 0, it's 100% fermentation degree. And the alcohol goes from 5.85 to 8.9%. Bitterness is low, and the color, as I said, is pale. Some flaws in Geuze. Well, old hop character. It can taste like ripe cheese. If it's even a big problem, it can even smell like old socks. This can be really a problem. Diacetyl can also be a problem. You know, diacetyl from other beers, it should not be present. And normally, if there is some in the lambic, it's reduced by bottle re-fermentation. Then there is also the problem of high levels of lactic acid or butyric acid, like sour butter. It's not so fantastic. Normally, this kind of Geuze is considered as second quality, but it can be very refreshing in the summer months. And of course, vinegar, that is a no-go. Normally, a level of more than 1.5 grams of vinegar in a Geuze should be seen as not fit for the market. Ethyl acetate and acetone, it smells like solvent. If your Geuze smells like nail polish, it is not what you like. Then there is the horse sweat. The nose should always be clean of a Geuze. 4EP is the smell of horse sweat. H2S is what drains can smell. You should not have this in a glass of Geuze or in a bottle of Geuze. The goaty and waxy aromas and flavors, so they can be present, but too much, it's not cheese we are selling. Phenolic and DMS aromas, reminding burnt rubber. That is the classical one from bacteria while brewing in the summer season or when it is too warm. And so then your beer tastes like burnt rubber. Not so fantastic. And lack of carbonation, as I said, the beer cannot be flat. And then floating particles in the bottle. Okay, we can accept some because it's bottle condition, but it's always better that the yeast sediment sticks well on the bottom of the bottle. And cork taste or moldy taste from unclean casks, that is absolutely a no-go. Okay, I'll just show you some examples of what we are selling today as types of Geuze at the Boon Brewery. The first one on the left is our traditional Oude Geuze Boon, which is about 85% of our sales of Geuze. And I must say, in our brewery, about half of our production in total is traditional Geuze. And then this one, so the traditional one is 7% of alcohol. And then there is the black label. That's a very dry one. We talked about a high degree of apparent fermentation. This one has normally a degree of fermentation of 95, sometimes close to 100. And then there is another one, but I'll start with the Mariage Parfait. Mariage Parfait is a blend of Lambics of 1 and 3 years with a lot of mostly 3 years old Lambic. And there the alcohol content is not 7, but 8%. And as the brewery exists now, 50 years, I started 50 years ago with the blendery and then brewery in 1990. We made a Mariage Parfait of 10 volumes. So we made a few broods 3 years or 4 years ago and 3 years ago of 10%. And then they were bottled a year ago. And so now the beer is released. Complicated if you want to do something special in Geuze. But now the beer has been released for our 50 years. We still have some crates, but it's probably a few weeks and then it will be in the market. And then there is another special one. I talked about lambic and oats. Well, some guys told me that it's impossible to make lambic with some oats. So I made a few broods with 10% of oats in 2 different years. Again, it was aged and then blended. And then we made one Geuze that is called Rémy Le Mercier. And Rémy Le Mercier, that was a tax guy. And he wrote a document in the 16th century describing how beer should be brewed in Halle. So it's here in our city. And so, and Rémy Le Mercier describes everything like the beer is still today, except he allows oats. So you're not forced to use oats, but it's allowed. And so, because some people do not believe that it is possible to make some Geuze or lambic with oats, we just did it, and it's a very nice one. So I talked a lot, and I see it's already 36 minutes, so you have some more time for questions.
Thank you, Frank. That was absolutely superb and brilliant. Thank you for being bearing with us and dealing with the technology. Magda is going to read out some questions. Some other people have answered them. I don't know if you want to stop sharing your screen, Frank. If you click on the red stop sharing.
I can do that, yes.
Yep.
I just stop sharing.
Fantastic, thank you. And Magda, are you okay to read out some of the questions?
And now it should disappear, or
yeah, I'm scrolling in the search of the first one. Oh,
yeah.
maybe 2 first one. Exactly what week are you starting to brew? And then the second one, how many times a year?
I'm just trying to
Okay.
just a moment. I have to get you on my the others on my other screen. Oh, how can I get you on the other screen? Yeah, okay.
So the first question
Okay,
from
go
our
on.
viewers was exactly what week are you starting to brew?
Oh, we just started the first week of October, and we started with 3 small brews, just because then we do some work in our laboratory to do some analysis, on the wild yeast to see how much yeast we collect, what different types of yeast, if everything is okay. So we do not want to start if there are too much bacteria, still too much bacteria in the air. So this year it was very much okay. So we are now at this moment brewing our third week. Some more question?
Okay. Actually, there are some more on the chat. Let me check for the second one. There was a question about isovalerian acid, but I guess you've already mentioned that in the flaws slide.
The question was, I did not understand very well. Is there?
It was about isovalerian acid, but I think you have already covered that.
Isovalerin, yes, isovalerin acid that is present in the hops, and you can smell it in the bags of aged hops. But normally it's quite volatile. So if you boil, normally even in a 2 hours boil, it's gone.
Mm-hmm. The next one, how should you store Geuze? Standing or lying down? Lying down, I'm talking different things here.
That is your choice. If you lay it down, it's of course you can. You're sure that your cork will never dry out and that you will not lose some carbon dioxide. So if the plan is to keep a bottle for 10 or 20 years, it's better to lay it down. Now, in most bars, it's important to keep the bottles straight up in the crates because they serve them straight up. So if you take a bottle that lays down, you have to serve it in a basket and to pour it in the glass without sediment. And so not everybody is well trained to do that. So our consult is always, if it's just if you buy bottles at the brewery and they're in crates standing right up, normally this cork is okay for up to 4 or 5 years. So if you serve it within that lapse of time, it's okay to keep the bottles right up. Also because people have special fridges at 14C to put their bottles in, and so that's a good idea. But you can. It's up to your choice.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting question, what is the point of having both winter and spring barley? What do they contribute to lambic?
What is the point of?
It's about barley. What is the point of having both winter and spring barley? What do
Yeah.
they contribute to lambic?
A very long time ago, lambic was brewed only with winter barley, because in Belgium the climate is such that the growing season is too short for spring barley. And the problem with short seasons is that you get into problems with quality or with molds growing into your ores. So there was no spring barley in Belgium before the arrival of, say, lager beer, or so spring barley arrived here in the 19th century. The advantage is that spring barley has less beta-glucan. So beta-glucan is, of course, is interesting because it gives some fullness to the beer, and it helps foam stability. But beta-glucan is a problem in brewing. So you need, if you make use all varieties of spring barley, of winter barley. Sorry, winter barley. You need special devices on your mash tun to get the wort separated. So the arrival of spring barley made brewers adapt their way of brewing.
Mhm. And now for something completely different. It's a question from John. Please ask Frank what it feels like to be a rock star. I guess this question has a lot of in common with the number of the viewers tonight.
I don't know. This is an unexpected question for me, because I do my job like everybody does his job, and I start early in the morning, and I'm retired now for a while, but I'm still at the brewery, so I don't feel rock star at all. I'm just doing my job, and I like it very much. I think everybody who is able to make his job from his hobby, he can be a happy person.
Okay. Oh, the questions appear really, really quickly. I hope I'm able to get to all of these. But another interesting one. I saw some new lambic producers making lambic without turbid mash, just using normal mash. How this will improve or make worth lambic? Cheers from Brazil.
The turbid mash system is important for lambic, because if you want to age a beer for 2 and 3 years, all the components of it have to be really the right ones. So for example, if the wort is too rich, I mean on protein side, if it's too rich on the protein side, you will have an important growth of bacteria. You will help to feed them. If you do not use the turbid mash system, it might be that an important part of the starch is not gelatinized, because we use 40% of unmalted wheat. So an important thing is that the turbid mash, when it is cooked, it also coagulates protein. And when it comes back on the mash tun, a lot of protein matter stays in the spent grains. So it's not cooked in the copper. It's quite technical, but these are very good reasons to use the turbid mash system. So, of course, you can always brew beer with 40% of unmalted wheat, age it, and when it gets sour, say, wow, I make lambic. But honestly, sometimes it's also what they call lambic by accident, and that is mostly not the most fantastic beer.
Oh, now something about food pairing. What are your recommendations for pairing of lambic with food?
Lambic or Geuze for a glass of Geuze. Yeah, here in our region, we combine it with food like you would combine a glass of white wine or sparkling white wine. So it matches very good. A very classical one are mussels with Geuze, and you also prepare it with Geuze, but also half a dozen of oysters or fish. A lot of fish is very, very nice. Also, Flemish carbonade, which is meat that was macerated or marinated for a whole day or day and a night in Geuze. It works very well.
Mhm,
I think there are a lot of recipes on the internet.
mhm. Sorry, I might have skipped that question because it appears for the second time. Why do you use feathers instead of stainless steel vessels? Is micro-oxidation important? I imagine an old feather has near no to impression of wood for the beer.
Okay, the reason why we use foeders instead of stainless steel tanks, is that the question? Well,
yeah, instead of
yes.
stainless steel vessels.
Yeah, yes. Well, we of course we did this test, and the beer that comes out of stainless steel and foeders is quite different. And there are two reasons. Brettanomyces yeast, although we can catch them, as you can say, on the cool ship, they survive in wooden casks. So they are long-living yeasts. And when all yeast and even bacteria are dead in a cask, these Brettanomyces, they can survive in the internal 0.5 centimeter to 1 centimeter depth. They will survive there because they are able to use wood sugars to stay in life. These wood sugars, they will not eat the food. Right? And then there is another thing. A wooden cask is a micro oxygenation for these wild yeasts. So Brettanomyces yeast survive in the oak and they find some oxygen from outside. But this is so these are so small amounts that the beer inside the wooden cask is not oxidated. But although it can happen, so if lambic stays too long on a foeder or on a wooden cask, and there is nothing left for Brettanomyces to ferment, even not of the more complicated sugars, then finally the beer will oxidize. And so it's an essential part of traditional Geuze that lambic ages in wooden casks or in foeders. If you want just sour lambic for blending it into fruit beer, of course, lambic from a stainless steel tank will fit because the taste of the fruit will dominate, or even from a sweet fruit beer, the taste of the sweetness and the fruit will dominate, and the lambic will not really develop its fantastic aroma.
Mm-hmm. Brett, it's already 9:03, so
Yeah,
just wanted to ask, how long can I proceed with reading next questions?
Let's take maybe two or three. I think there's two more questions or three more questions. I think some people are answering the questions, Frank. There's some questions about food, what beer and food and Geuze. But Magda, there's a couple of questions about challenges to the brewery and one about harvesting wild yeast.
Yeah, so there's the question about harvesting wild yeast. Is it wise to do it nearby a fruit garden or any other good surrounding to harvest wild yeast?
That's a very interesting question. We know that it works well for a lambic brewery if it's close to, for example, a river. Our brewery is close to the Zenne River. We even have a part of the brewery at the other side of the river, so we're on both sides. But why is this? Because in the valley here, the coldest place is close to the river because the cold air, of course, is down and up on the hills. It's warmer here. We're not in the Alps, so and so if we have some mist in the morning, we will always have it here, but not on the other side of the village. Is there an influence of other things? Of course, orchards will have an influence, but there is also a risk of negative influence. For example, from hospitals. That was in the old books. It was written no brewery in the vicinity of a hospital or from waste belts, or in the close to a slaughtering, where they slaughter animals. How is that called? I don't know all these words in English because that is. But so everything that is problematic for microbiology is problematic for abattoir. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I see it on the screen.
Maybe
So
to
you can't have that close to in the vicinity. And so there used to be breweries that were farms, and they had cows at the brewery, and they had a lot of not so fantastic results in the beer. And also from manure from horses, not a very good idea. These were the big problems of quality that the brewers used to have. But today we don't have these problems anymore.
Maybe just to conclude this Q&A part, I will combine two questions in one. The first one was about challenges that you see for your brewery. And the second one, how do you see the future of Geuze? So maybe a little bit about challenges and opportunities for the future.
Yeah. Well, challenges, of course, like for everybody, climate is a very important one. The last 6-7 years, there have been big differences in the quality of our raw materials, also prices. The crop of this year is okay, but we've had, and that is the same case for other breweries too. Barley with a high gelatinizing temperatures, which is you have to adapt your brew house. I mean the recipe of and you have to adapt it every year. So also a lot of new varieties of barley. That's not always so easy for us to work with. Also, for example, for cherries, that's not for Geuze, but for cherries, I think this year price of cherries is 3 times the price of the year before, and then we don't know what we can do to make affordable cherry beer. I hear some say they will dilute, etc., but you cannot do that. You cannot. So we hope the prices will be better. But we've never seen that before. I'm in the business now for 50 years. I've never seen this before. And then there is another thing, and in general, everywhere in the world, for one or another reason, after COVID, people think that they have to be to work on their condition, and so alcohol consumption. So not only of beer, but also wine, also whiskey. Everywhere, alcohol consumption decreased. So I know a lot of small breweries that get into trouble because, of course, brewing is also something economical, and if your volumes are too small, yeah, well, you have to pay your people. You have to get it organized, and so that will be. We hope that we will still have enough sales. Anyhow, sales of Geuze this year were very nice for us, so even better than the year before, and it helps. But other beers or fruit beers, they really suffer from a difficult market.
That's a
So
really
I'm happy that my two sons, they run the brewery now, and that they are smart enough to run it the way it should be run.
That's a very positive way to finish the webinar, Frank. Can I thank you? There's lots and lots of thanks on the chat window. I think everyone's had a fantastic time. We've had a record number of visitors, and so thank you, Frank, and it is much appreciated on behalf of everybody. So we do appreciate you giving up your time. We appreciate you're very busy, but we do appreciate on EBCU for the presentation, and thank you to Mark for help making it happen as well.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.